Only 7% of those surveyed still believe Moscow should press on with military operations in Ukraine. This marks the lowest support since the conflict erupted in early 2022. On the other hand, a staggering 66% now demand that peace talks with Kyiv begin immediately. But this shift isn't just political, it's the quiet reverberation of deep national trauma. More than half, 58%, say the war's wound cuts through their own lives, not just headlines. 3 in 10 have lost someone close in combat. Another third have loved ones still fighting on the front lines. This conflict isn't distant anymore, it lives inside homes, lingers over dinner tables, and haunts memories. Who pushes for peace? It's mostly women and the youth under 24. In rural areas, nearly 3/4 want an end to the fighting. Among those who openly reject Putin's leadership, an overwhelming 82% demand peace. This division is sharp and telling. Where people get their news shapes their views dramatically. Those tuning out state TV, turning instead to independent digital outlets, are more vocal about ending the war. They reject the official narrative and believe their country is veering off course. Conversely, those still backing the conflict tend to be older men, Moscow residents, and loyal supporters of the current leadership. Even among state TV watchers, who traditionally echo Kremlin lines, support for continuing the war is slipping. The iron grip of the government's media dominance is cracking. But here's the most profound change: people asking for peace aren't whispering anymore. They're raising their voices. This war isn't confined to far-off battlefields. It's a heavy presence inside Russian kitchens. It's an oppressive weight on wallets and minds. Every creak in the floorboards, every empty space on grocery shelves, they all tell the same story: the conflict has reached into the very soul of everyday life. What will happen when this pressure finally snaps? Previously, we saw how voices calling for peace have broken their silence, no longer whispered but spoken aloud. The war's shadow now reaches far beyond the battlefield. It invades Russian homes, seeping into their kitchens, clawing at their wallets, and invading their very minds. Inflation used to be just a number on a chart, a distant whisper hidden behind official reports. Now, it's a piercing alarm ringing through every street and every market square. The official rate might say 9%, but reality tells a far harsher story. People's refrigerators tell the truth. What's on the price tags? Nothing close to what families face when day-to-day survival is on the line. Prices have surged over 10.7% in just 1 year, and for many, food isn't a staple anymore, it's a luxury they can barely afford. Basic necessities like bread, milk, butter, and eggs have slipped out of reach, especially for pensioners, single-earner households, and minimum wage workers. Bread, a simple loaf that cost 15 rubles less than 2 years ago, now demands more than 40 rubles. Potatoes? Their price has tripled since last year. These are not mere numbers. They translate into empty plates and growing hunger. Imagine the desperate look in a mother's eyes when meat, cheese, or yogurt vanish from the shelves, not just because of their soaring prices, but because the shelves stand bare. Chain stores are littered with gaping holes where these items used to be. And when eggs or fresh vegetables shoot up in price overnight, the thin margin that low-wage families cling to disappears in days. Now picture an average family of 4. Before their pay even touches their hands, the household bills strike hard. Rent, maintenance, utilities, electricity, gas, water, waste collection, taxes, swallow 1/3 of their monthly income almost immediately. The kitchen follows, swallowing 35 to 40% of what's left just to buy basic groceries. Add meat or milk, and half the paycheck evaporates in food alone. Life doesn't pause for bills, it demands more still. School supplies, winter boots for the kids, surprise medical costs, all unavoidable. None of these are indulgences. Yet together, they gouge deep holes in the family budget. These holes fuel a relentless, crushing cycle of poverty that tightens its grip with each passing day. How long can people survive like this? When food itself becomes a privilege, what happens to hope? What breaks first, the body or the spirit? Previously, we saw how families scramble to cover their bills, rent, utilities, and taxes, sucking away 1/3 of their income before the month even begins. Then groceries take over, devouring up to half of what's left once meat and milk enter the picture. But life isn't only a ledger of expenses. When schools reopen, the costs don't stop. There are stationery supplies to buy, new boots needed for winter's blistering chill, and surprise medical bills that hit like cold shocks. None of these are luxuries, yet together, they carve deep holes into already fragile budgets. This relentless pressure fuels a vicious cycle of poverty that tightens its grip every day. Imagine some families barely able to offer their children stale bread soaked in bitter tea for breakfast. Retirees stretch their final rubles, surviving the last days of each month on just pasta and water. In dark alleyways and forgotten corners of cities, people rifling through supermarket trash for scraps are no longer rare figures, they are multiplying by the day, like shadows growing longer at dusk. Saving money? That's become a distant dream. No one thinks about setting aside funds today, just surviving until tomorrow is a triumph. One unexpected bill, one sudden expense, can topple the entire precarious balance. Rather than solving problems, the habit now is to delay them, to push today's debts onto the future. Credit cards, installment plans, consumer loans, these have become lifelines, but also traps. Rising interest rates mean debt isn't free, monthly payments siphon off wages as surely as taxes or rent. A cycle this fragile cannot last without breaking. And what follows is beginning to show, the vanishing middle class. Families who once planned summer vacations, saved for their children's education, and dreamed of a better future, now plan around weekly sales flyers, desperate to stretch every ruble as far as it can go. Yet as the economic storm batters lives, grief walks alongside it. Since the war began, over 1 million Russian soldiers have died. The streets whisper this sorrow silently, carried in the cold earth their bodies now lie beneath. Gravediggers, braving frozen ground across the nation, from the capital to remote villages, work relentlessly through cruel winters. Coffins, wrapped in plain plastic sheets, arrive at small train stations, ready to be handed to waiting families, families that no longer just mourn soldiers, but lost children, lost futures. Some mothers greet these arrivals with tears that soak frozen ground. Some fathers crumble papers stamped with words like martyred and fling them away in despair, because these aren't just deaths recorded by the state, but a child stolen from a family's embrace. Yet this pain, these voices of grief and rage, stay buried from official broadcasts. Instead, they echo through private networks, whispers on social media, whispers and encrypted messages, heartfelt notes stuck to tombstones. They took our son, and now refuse to tell us why. Bread may be rationed, but coffins travel without cost. This is not a story from an ancient tragedy, it's the harsh present, resonating in the cold stillness of countless Russian homes. What happens when a nation's heartbeat is drowned by hunger and loss? When hope is outnumbered by despair? The next act is yet to unfold. Will the silence break, or will it consume everything in its path? In the shadow of a forsaken past, a haunting reality emerges. Today, the specter of uncertainty looms, casting doubt over the very future of families in Russia. Economic stability hangs by a thread, social security feels like a distant echo, and the rule of law is a mere memory. People are hesitant to bring children into this turmoil. Even the Kremlin acknowledges this gripping fear, and yet, how can a nation like this thrive? Despite mounting crises, attempts to address declining birth rates remain superficial. A program aimed at boosting childbirth, initiated in 2007, only saw momentary success, raising the fertility rate by a paltry 0.15 during a fleeting oil boom. As revenues dwindled, the Kremlin grasped at straws. Measures to restrict abortions emerged, along with mandates for gynecological approvals. A reality series, glorifying early motherhood, failed to ignite a spark of familial growth. The heart of the matter, entrenched social and economic strife, remained untouched. In a chilling move, the state now withholds monthly birth data, a grim acknowledgement of a deteriorating future. Instead of confronting the unsettling truth, the Kremlin cloaks itself in rhetoric. The number of newborns dwindles while the shadow of migration grows deep. Nearly 14 million migrant workers flood the nation, many hailing from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, where fertility rates double the low expectations of their Russian counterparts. These individuals not only toil here but bring their families, solidifying migrant communities, particularly in urban areas like Moscow. Imagine a tapestry woven from diverse threads, yet the identity that once defined Russia frays at the edges. How will this transformation reshape the cultural landscape of a nation on the brink? As the future teeters, one must ask, what becomes of a country where the once dominant voice is replaced by myriad tongues? The next chapter awaits, and it may not be written in the language of the past. Let's revisit the story so far. Russia's streets no longer echo just with Russian voices. Migrants from Asian countries have woven themselves deep into the urban fabric. Fertility rates remain high in neighboring regions. Soon, ethnic Russians may become a minority in their own cities. Russian might fade into just another language heard on public buses. This shift shakes the very foundations of a state that once thrived on its imperial identity. But here comes the shocking contradiction. While official rhetoric glorifies a traditional family and nationalist pride, the country's entire infrastructure depends heavily on migrant workers. Without their labor, cities would stall, building projects halted, pensions unpaid, taxes shrinking, and even the army left short of recruits. The realities of governance and economy clash painfully with Moscow's polished nationalist story. Yet, the Kremlin seems trapped in a different reality altogether. State media still paints pictures of battlefield victories, but the grim truth is far from the televised celebrations. More coffins arrive, funerals grow quieter, and the threads holding society together strain under invisible weight. As hope frays, silence tightens its grip. Denial was the first refuge. When voices pleaded for peace, the government shouted patriotism louder. The war was spun as a fight for the nation's very existence. But this grand narrative falls apart the moment people face their daily lives: empty cabinets, lingering fear, disappearing futures. The gap between official stories and lived reality grows wider by the day. Worse still, censorship now acts as a barrier to truth. The word war is replaced with vague euphemisms. Those daring to speak out, yearning for peace, face accusations of betrayal. In homes where grief and hunger collide, the state's message rings hollow. How long can a society survive when the heart of its reality is silenced by fear? What happens to a nation when its own story no longer fits the lives of its people? When denial becomes the official stance, can hope be louder than silence? The cracks beneath the surface deepen. Will they shatter the order that held Russia's fate, or trigger a transformation yet unseen? In recent times, an unsettling reality has emerged in Russia, where ordinary citizens are grappling with the stark contrast between government propaganda and their own lived experiences. Despite narratives broadcasted on state television claiming that victory is near, reports from a handful of independent telegram channels reveal the harsh truths: lives are being lost, military operations are mismanaged, and the toll on families continues to mount. As these official statements flood the airwaves, the true struggles of daily life tell a different story. Families are dealing with empty pantry shelves, rationed fuel, and the poignant cries of the elderly who have been pushed into deep financial despair. Each morning serves as a reminder of this relentless decline, a painful reflection of lives unraveling. The Kremlin's tactics have evolved from mere misinformation to a strategy of suppression, silencing any dissenting voices. Peace advocates face harsh retribution, with mobilizations against the war strictly prohibited. Yet, the defiance of the people grows ever louder. With every attempt to crush free speech, another courageous spirit emerges to challenge the prevailing narrative. A growing chorus of voices questions the state's motives and desires the truth over orchestrated messages. So, can a nation bound by fear ever truly reclaim its voice? When will the echoes of everyday anguish rise above the government's empty proclamations? The future hangs in delicate balance. As more individuals awaken to the dichotomy of their existence and bravely resist, a pivotal moment is drawing near. Prepare for the unfolding tale of a society on the precipice of change, where hope may yet thrive against the odds. Could a leader once seen as invincible unravel so completely? Vladimir Putin was once hailed as the man who resurrected Russia from the chaos of the 1990s. He seemed untouchable, outmaneuvering the West, wielding energy like a global weapon, reshaping power balances with cold precision. Yet today, that ironclad order has cracked, and at its core stands one shattering force: the war in Ukraine. Not so long ago, Russian generals declared victory was near. Kiev would fall within days. Europe would fracture, and America would stay distant. A grand stage was set, destined to crown Putin's legacy. But the moment he stepped onto it, everything collapsed. This war didn't just roll tanks across borders, it tore open the very veins of a nation. The Russian army, once feared, failed to keep pace with the lightning speed of modern tech warfare. The economy gasped under crushing sanctions, suffocating like a man trapped underwater. Society drifted in a fog of secrecy, propaganda, and confusion. But perhaps the deepest wound cuts through the people themselves, wearied by endless conflict, uncertainty, and isolation. Now, standing on the edge of an abyss, Russians no longer ask just when the war will end. They wonder when life might feel normal again. And that question is turning to anger. Those who once cheered from the sidelines now turn away, fists clenched, haunted by the future of their children. Out of 143 million souls, 80 million have lost faith in the war and its architect. They crave peace. A stark survey from the independent Levada Center in August 2025 reveals the truth: only 27% support continuing military operations. This is the lowest backing since the war began in February 2022. Meanwhile, a sweeping 66% demand peace talks with Kyiv. This shift is more than numbers. It echoes trauma lived in homes, losses etched into memory, whispered. The war is no longer a distant headline, it's felt in every empty shelf, every unpaid bill, and every... Could this be the... What happens next could change everything. Will this tide of discontent break through the walls of silence? Every heart. Could a leader once seen as invincible unravel so completely? Vladimir Putin was once hailed as the man who resurrected Russia from the chaos of the 1990s. He seemed untouchable, outmaneuvering the West, wielding energy like a global weapon, reshaping power balances with cold precision. Yet today, that ironclad order has cracked, and at its core stands one shattering force: the war in Ukraine. Not so long ago, Russian generals declared victory was near. Kyiv would fall within days. Europe would fracture, and America would stay distant. A grand stage was set, destined to crown Putin's legacy. Yet, the moment he stepped onto that stage, it collapsed beneath him. This war did not just shake tanks and battlefields, it ruptured the very lifeblood of a nation. The Russian military faltered in the face of modern, technology-driven warfare. The economy, choked by sanctions, gasped for air. Society drifted in a haze of opaque governance and relentless propaganda. But the deepest wound was psychological. Endless conflict, uncertainty, and isolation gnawed away at the spirit of the people. Now, teetering on the edge of an abyss, Russians don't just ask when the war will end, they wonder if normal life will ever return. That quiet doubt is swelling into something far darker: anger. The same hands that once waved flags in fervent support now clench into fists, haunted by fears for their children's future. Out of 143 million people, around 80 million have lost faith in their leader and his war. They cry for peace. A stark survey from the independent Levada Center in August 2025 reveals the truth: only 27% support continuing military operations. This is the lowest backing since the war began in February 2022. Meanwhile, a sweeping 66% demand peace talks with Kyiv. This shift is more than numbers. It echoes trauma lived in homes, losses etched into memory, whispered. The war is no longer a distant headline, it's felt in every empty shelf, every unpaid bill, and every... Could this be the... What happens next could change everything. Will this tide of discontent break through the walls of silence? Or will the story of this fractured nation end in tragedy? Every morning, Russians confront a bitter truth reflected in empty kitchen cupboards and vacant chairs. While state television loudly claims victory is within reach, a handful of independent voices tell a starkly different story. Behind the propaganda, lives are slipping away, military plans crumble, and families bear an unimaginable burden. The markets groan under bare shelves. Fuel is strictly rationed. The faint sobs of elderly neighbors echo through dimly lit apartments, crushed by spiraling debts and despair. This relentless unraveling is a daily torment, impossible to escape. Yet the Kremlin refuses to acknowledge it. Words like war vanish from official broadcasts, erased by a shield of harsh censorship. Anyone daring to plead for peace is branded a traitor. Social media activists face brutal crackdowns, their calls for dialogue silenced before they even reach the public ear. The state's grip tightens, turning dissent into a dangerous defiance. But the human spirit resists. Every attempt to silence the truth only fans the flames of courage. A growing chorus of voices refuses to be quieted, questioning the official narrative, demanding honesty. Ordinary citizens, once paralyzed by fear, now glimpse the cracks in the armor of power. Can a nation so deeply bound by fear ever break free and reclaim its voice? When will the whispered pain of everyday suffering shatter the deafening lies broadcast from the Kremlin? This fragile balance teeters on the edge. More Russians awaken to the stark contradiction between what they are told and what they feel. Against overwhelming odds, defiance blooms like a fragile flame in winter's grasp. The next chapter in this tragic saga is on the horizon, a story of silent rebellion, of a society quietly preparing to rise. In these uncertain times, hope is a dangerous but glorious spark. The question is not if this spark will ignite, but how fiercely it will burn.